The following is a presentation of WDSE TV.
It's almost 100 years since the first Finnish immigrants settled in the open lands of the upper Midwest. And like immigrants from all nations, each helped to shape a heritage for the generations that followed. Many of us grew up among Finnish friends and relatives who reminisce from time to time about the happenings of old. And the preservation of their music, drama, and literature has left a Finnish tradition as vivid and as colorful as when the first immigrants settled this land. They had left Finland because they had nothing. Most are unskilled, poor, and rural in background. Farmers and woodsmen, their homeland caught in an economic and political transformation. For these earliest immigrants, the move to America meant opportunity and new freedoms. Most early comers were young men, unmarried, and hoping to make their fortune. Contrary to a commonly accepted notion, it was not the resemblance of the landscape to Finland which first attracted Finns to this northern wilderness. Instead, it would be the opening of the iron ranges of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. This would be a land where mining was king. Here the young Finn could find his first work in the mine shafts or the rock piles of the Gogebic or Mesabi. It was the hardest, dirtiest, and most dangerous work they would ever know.
You know, it was real easy to get here. It didn't cost you much. Everything would be set up. You could come to the mines on the Mesaba Range and get a job, walk right up to the shaft of the mine, and you were hired. But I'll tell you one thing, try to get out. The movement out of here was very difficult. Suddenly, what was inexpensive became expensive. And lots of people came here and were horrified at what they found in northern Minnesota.
The foul air of the mine was in sharp contrast to the fresh air of the farmlands and forests of Finland. In addition to the mine, there was the trauma of living in a multi-ethnic town, a town filled with saloons and backroom gambling dens. A young Finnish man would not send for his family until he was settled himself. Families remained apart, often for years. Seasonal work added to their frustrations. Faced with hopelessness, many of these miners would be forced to turn to the land.
When we talk about why the Finns settled the surrounding countryside, another reason was the fact that those who stayed within the mines, by, say, the year 1907, some of our earliest Finns had had a lot of experience in mining. They knew about the dangers in the mine, but they knew mostly about the way they were treated by their captains and bosses. And I'll tell you one thing, it was no different from Finland. They were the lower class. They were the nothings. In fact, the mining captains bragged about it. They talked about it. He said, we don't mind. We push people through this mine. In fact, our mules are more important to us than some of these immigrant people. They didn't look upon those people who were mining at Sudan and in these mines of the Mesaba particularly as Americans or as human beings. They were foreigners. They talked funny. And the Finns were among them. And their treatment was bad. And in 1907, when the Western Federation of Miners organized, that early strike committee was put together by an immigrant Italian, one Teofilo Petriella. But if you look at the members of his strike committee, you'll see that a good share of those names were Finns. And it wasn't, I don't think, because the Finns were the most radical of the bunch. That was the largest number of miners in Mesaba mines in 1907. You look at the rolls, they were Finns and Finnish names. The result was the strikers were blackballed. Now, the Irishmen who were striking and people of American and Canadian descent who were also striking among those Finns, they left. But here now, the young Finn, it's a long way to Finland. What are you going to do? You've just brought your loved ones, your wife, your family with you. What do? You have to make a living. The land around the Mesaba Range was entirely undeveloped. It was still practically free under homestead and lumber company type agreements. They got the land for next to nothing. Sure, they're going to take it. Sure, they're going to take it. It meant life to them, and it also gave them a sense of something that they'd been looking, that's real important to Finns, and that's individual dignity. I don't have to answer to somebody. Maybe independence is the word.
In the decades that followed the turn of the century, this western Great Lakes region saw enormous change. The mining industry continued to grow. New towns and communities sprang up around the region. The lumber and forest industries began to peak, and the ratio of men to women had at last narrowed to less than 3 to 1. Finns who were yet to arrive in America were attracted by the inexpensive acreage offered by regional promoters and lumber companies. Although most land was located in cutover or submarginal farming areas, these 40-acre plots seemed quite large compared to the small 2 or 3 acre farms generally available in Finland.
I came in 1913 from Finland with my mother. Neither one of us spoke English. Naturally, I just had barely learned Finnish. We had shipping tags sewed onto our clothes so that we wouldn't get lost along the way. I was 3 years old at the time. We came to the United States at Sault Ste. Marie. From there to Duluth by train, from Duluth to Hibbing by train. That's where my father had come 3 years earlier. He worked in the mines. But when we came, he had also approved on a piece of property in the Trout Lake Township, homesteaded it, and built a one-room log cabin. We moved up there. And we probably had a cow and a few chickens, and we raised a garden. Them days, we didn't have no social services or relief. If you didn't work, you starved.
Hard-working people who came to this country first. They all do lots of hard work. All the farm workers, and some men go to the mining and they have no health to go to mining, so they take the country land and they started farming. And they have big families in it, in that farmhouse. I came here so much easy life. Oh, that's awful hard work in Finland. Man and wife and even kids, soon as they're gonna do something, they have to work so hard. Big family and all have to go work, hard work. So that's why my brother take me to this country.
The soils of this northern area were generally too poor to support a cash crop. Numerous Finns established small dairy herds to earn extra income.
This place, I think, is about the oldest homestead around this area here, a big area, where the original part of the family is still living.
John Long has spent all 74 years of his life working the family farm his father had left him.
This used to be the old dairy barn. We had about 15 milk cows here and a lot of young stock. And then when we got rid of the cattle, the last ones, about 6 years ago, we had beef in the very end. And then my shop was getting kind of crowded, so I thought I'll move part of my equipment here as long as there was a lot of extra room.
Not unlike the early settlers of this area, John divided his time between a full-time job and his farm, and for over 43 years spent his daytime hours at Floodwood's Co-op garage and his evenings tending to the farm.
Yeah, Dad, he always thought he wanted to be independent and like living on a farm. Like at first when he came here, he worked at the sawmills to get money enough to buy land. Land was cheap at that time, $12.50 an acre. He cut all the material for the buildings off this land here, the house, the barn, and the whole works. And then he started slowly working on the buildings, and at the same time he was trying to open land, clear land. The house is all hand-hewed out of huge balsam. And he done most of the work himself. I don't know how he got those heavy logs up on top always.
John's mother, Anna Long, still lives in a 1914 vintage home with John and another son. Anna has demonstrated a meaningful life of hard work and dedication to her family.
No, kun minun miehellä oli 1000 taalaa säästössä, minulla ei penniikään, niin sillä 1000 taalalla ostettiin tämä maa. 5000 maksoi sitten yksi vörtti, 500. Ja sitten se yksi vörtti maksettiin ja toinen jäi sitten velaksi. Niin sitten kun se osti tämän maan, minä en tiennyt ollenkaan, että se on maata ostanut. Yksi mies sanoi minulle, että Pauli on ostanut maan. Ei siellä silloin kerrottu, että ostetaanko tai että mitä tehdään. Ei miehet siellä kyselleet semmoisia. Niin se osti tämän maan ja maksoi sen yhden vörtin ja toinen jäi velaksi sitten. Ja niin, sitten kun se tuli sen papereihin kanssa, niin se sanoi, että pojan vörtti on ostettu. Jani oli jo silloin pikku baby. Ja sitten kun no se sitten metsätavaraa teki, taisia, hakkasia ja niin vartin sai taisilta ja sillä lailla sitten maksettiin sitä. Ja ensimmäinen hevonenkin kun ostettiin, se ostettiin velaksi. Ja niin sillä lailla se sitten hakkasi niitä taisia ja keväällä kun syksyllä ostettiin hevonen, niin keväällä oli maksettu. Se oli kova työmies tekemään työtä.
Nearly all of America's early land settlers did some type of logging. For the Finnish immigrant, logging was a natural.
The interesting thing about a Finn, everyone was born with an axe in their hand or a pair of skis. And so when they came over here, they were excellent lumberjacks, if you want to call them, woods workers. And they're very good at timber work, making log cabins, and that it itself adapted itself for them to do a lot of timber work in the mines, such as making underground shafts. Also the lumbering industry, there were certain skills there that were very much needed, especially running logs down rivers, river rats. Most of these Finnish boys had run a lot of logs into the old country.
By the end of the 1880s, most of Upper Michigan's logging operations had already been exhausted. A large number of companies began moving west into northeastern Minnesota, and with them came the lumberjacks. Despite dangerous working conditions, many Finns found this work acceptable. The life of the jack was generally unsettled, and jobs could change with demand from large company to small. But it allowed these men to wander from camp to camp.
Well, my thinking is that they like independence. Free to come and go and do what they like. At least that's true of myself. I was never happy in somebody else's employment.
Eino Jopi has spent his entire life working the forests of northern Minnesota. His earlier years cutting wood on his father's farm. The Jopi family moved to Isabella, Minnesota in 1945, some 4 years after Eino started working this area. Today, 2 of Eino's sons, Al and Daniel, run the family business. For Finns in logging, this family represents one of the last of its kind.
Actually, most of the people that settled here worked in for lumber camps, and the owners of the camps were like from Duluth or elsewhere, and then they stayed here during the week. I think we're one of the few families that actually lived in Isabella through all the years and have stayed here. There's others that live in Finland, or others or lived in the temporary camps around Sawbill Landing and Forest Center. But it's all long past now. So
the old timers used to be able to sit down and cut a cord to a cord and a half of wood, and they made a real good day's wage. Really good, real good. You know, it was hard work, but if you were able to do it, you made good money. You know, a pair of boots sold for 50 cents, and you'd make $3 a day. That's not too bad.
Like the days of the 50-cent boots, the day of the old-time logger has long passed. Gone were the logging companies that supplied their work.
The logging wasn't that steady of a vocation, and farming proved to be a little bit too rough to make a livelihood, and they largely left during World War II into defense industries and service. And the older generation, of course, a lot of them have passed on, and some moved out otherwise. Logging is a pretty tough game. You know, it's the buyer's market, and I don't blame the mills that buy this product. It's good business, but the logger has no control over the price of the product. That's decided by somebody else, and it's a law of supply and demand, let's put it that way.
yeah, times have changed. There's more planning and you know, long-range planning.
It's a whole lot different than just going out and putting in a hard day's work anymore. You got to do that too, but there's all the planning and the paperwork and all that to go along with it.
They say that the Finlanders are known for what they call the sisu part of it, which is just whether you're too stubborn to quit or too ignorant to quit or whatever it is, but when the going gets hard, well, you slow down a little bit, and then, well, what the heck, we'll do it, you know. And after a while, that's part of the challenge too, is it?
That sisu can cost you lots of money.
Yeah.
Finns, whether living in the forests, on the farm, or in the city, generally group together. They more or less created their culture within a culture. To the first generation Finns, the preservation of a strong Finnish community was as important as making their own home.
Finns preserved Finnish culture because they had to here. It's the only way they could survive, and they took what was first. And the Finns may have taken, and did take it, a lot farther than any of the other national groups. I think we have enough evidence to say that very boldly now. They took to educating their own people. You could read a Finnish language. We had Finnish language newspapers on the range. You got all the news in Finnish. Had them and still do. And the idea of educating the young in America in 1906 was far different from the way it is now.
oli lemmissä, olipa se sellaisessa hantoota. Mukumma kun kaikki se hengessä. Hän oli kyllä oli hittäntä. Nuuliti vanhan lieppeliin, hittäntä. Aukujonau tierpassa se kyllänkö, itsensä rillanneet. Nuulilla vanhoilla pallossa oli muutkin itsensä piilanneet. Kaikki tanssi, papa sekä mamma hittäntä. Tanssin lapset ja tanssin ämmät hittäntä.
The years between the turn of the century and the end of World War I saw a great change for the Finnish rural school. America had changed its perception about patriotism. The new American public school began to see the importance of unifying their country with this common bond. For the young school-aged Finn, this process would begin with the learning of the English language, no easy task. This Finnish to English transition would continue in rural areas for some 30 years. Pressure was added to attaining a higher educational standard, but aside from this, these were just enjoyable times, perhaps simpler times.
Well, there was pressure, and we were, some people looked down on us even because they thought we were a different breed of people, that we weren't as good as the rest of them.
Well, when I went to school the first day, there was only a teacher, there wasn't a teacher, it was just a girl that gave me paper and pencil. And that went on for a couple of weeks before I found out she was a teacher.
Once I had to go in the corner. There was two boys sitting in front of me, and I was sitting in the back with another girl. And the boys were, they had some animal cookies, and they had a penknife, and they stabbed that pig with a, and I laughed, and I had to go in the corner, and boys didn't get nothing. And killing a pig.
Being that we were Finnish, well, we just spoke Finnish, and we went in with the horse-drawn buses. And there was one family that were German, and they would sit there with their mouths open listening to us talk Finn all the way. And then, of course, there was some complaints about it, so the superintendent from school put a sign in the school bus that, "This is America, talk our language."
There are still recollections of difficulties with the language.
I had difficulty with the language up to the first grade. But I think in some rural communities like Toivola or Palo Country or Embarrass, where all the kids talked Finnish and then they were integrated in as a team, the school teacher could do it in a different way, and I don't think it was that much of a difficulty. Naturally, they still retained an accent.
I suppose it's just inborn. They're just used to saying things a certain way, and I don't want to imitate them because you possibly have heard how old-time Finn really talks. Efforts were made, however, to see what can be done about the accent, but the accent tends to remain.
Well, the Finnish people do have, it's hard for them to say their F's or S's or even the V's, but it depends what part of Finland they came from.
30, 40 years ago, it was a language barrier that made the difference. Many of the Finns, when they came to this country, they had difficulty in pronouncing English words. And that kind of caused a problem with other nationalities. Finns had a tendency to speak their own language. They still do nowadays.
Night schools and citizenship classes help Finns pledge themselves to become American. However, some Finns tended to view this process as an attack on Finnish heritage. The question of language and cultural maintenance became particularly sensitive to the Finnish church. To those outside the Finnish community, it was merely looked upon as being overly nationalistic or clannish. And yet the Finnish church was the first community building constructed in many rural areas. And for stricter Finns, all social activities were tied directly to the church. The Finnish language continued in most churches until the 1950s. However, many Finns began to see the need for an additional gathering place for social recreation. This is the Cedar Valley Community Center, currently serving as a town hall and originally built as a Finn hall by residents of the area. Halls like this are remembered by my generation as social centers where people met for athletic events, for recreation, for plays and dances. And they also served a good locale for weddings and funerals and anything of interest to the community where a group was required to get together. This was it.
On kauniina muistona Karjala maa, mutta vieläkä soimessa soinnatta, kun soittaja sormissa kuulot saa Säkkijärven polka. Se polka taas mennetä mielen tuo ja se outoa kaiputa rinnalla. Ei soittaja haittaren soittaa suo Säkkijärven polka.
It is possible that no other ethnic group in America has built and owned as many halls as the Finns. Even so, buildings like this one are few and far between. These halls still serve their communities, but their original purpose has somewhat diminished. To the early Finns and their children, the hall helped bond their families to the community. It was a place where only Finnish would be heard, a place where you could dance, sing, or watch a play, all in your own language. Finn halls were the home for all Finnish organizations, cultural, political, or religious. You might say the halls also established the first local gyms, although somewhat different from today's health clubs. Gymnastics were for both men and women. Even though most halls and hall-goers have disappeared, the tradition of the hall gathering continues. Today, these gatherings give Finnish-Americans a chance to listen to and to study their heritage.
I believe that Finnish people have always been sort of culture-hungry people. They have always had their athletic associations, the orchestras, the choirs, and the concerts, and whenever there's any opportunity for music making or dancing, they always took advantage of that. They were interested in light comedy, and it seemed to me that the lives that they had led left them in want of something funny, something easy to look at, and something to laugh at, and then go home and think about it. But Finnish people also appreciate drama very much, you know. They think that, you know, an empty play is an empty play. They mean it, there's nothing to it, you know.
Finnish-American show business dominated most halls. The entertainment served as a good source of fundraising, which helped to provide the hall with money for new construction and maintenance. Most of the actors were taken from the community.
If they wanted to participate in a choir, and if they wanted to sing, if they wanted to perform in an orchestra, you would certainly come and say that, well, I could tickle a violin, or I could play an accordion, and would there be a place for me? I think that people would come around and ask. And I don't think anyone was ever turned down, you know, because you're more than welcome to have these people.
Musical plays seemed to be a sure way to bring large audiences to your hall. Most members were more genuinely concerned with the entertainment value of the hall rather than the political views of the organization to which it was affiliated. This, however, did not stand in the way of feuding between the ranks.
They just wanted a better place for all the new people coming in, the Finnish people, especially from Finland, and a lot of single people. And at the time, it was a sort of they're trying to see who gets to the socialist opera and who gets into the temperance, which group they would join. And instead of getting out and getting to the taverns or the wrong groups of people, they decided to have a place for them. And we had a very big membership there. It seems to me it was 200 or 300 at one time.
Ilma Niemi is one of the last remaining members of Virginia's Temperance Society.
We used to get big crowds from all around the range towns here for just about anything that went on there. We'd have big crowds, and then sometimes they'd have dancing after, and always coffee and lunch. And we had very good actors here and put on really nice plays.
A hall is a place where people can come together and socialize and exchange fellowship or common ideas or something altogether. Where does a hall furnish or flourish the best? A place where you can get together with your own kind. The farther you are away from home. If home is close and everybody has home close to them, that hall will not survive. And if you look at the story of Minnesota, northeast Minnesota, the halls were destined to disappear as immigrant peoples began to feel and be at home in America. The hall then is the place where it takes the place of the family. It's mom and dad. It's all of these things that you don't have when you're far away from home.
Well, the younger generation just wasn't interested. And people got older, and then, but when we decided to sell, we did try to sell it to a Finnish group, which in that way the Kaleva people bought it, and they have carried on since. And
Well, tonight's performance is a little more festive than usual, but we have been having performances and activities at the former Temperance Hall, now the Kaleva Hall, since 1906. And it has a beautiful wooden dance floor, and there have been thousands of miles danced on the floor. Tonight we are dedicating new backdrops and scenery that have been painted as part of a restoration project for the hall.
Today's Finnish folk dancing is kept alive with authentic costumes and traditional dance steps by such groups as the Kisarit.
We have been together for 14 years, and our purpose is to preserve Finnish heritage and traditions here in America. Because if we want to, first of all, enjoy Finnish activities and Finnish tradition here, we have to build it for ourselves. And also, if we want to present it to the American audience, we have to create it and make it available to the American audience.
America is made of traditions from nearly all parts of the world. Without performances like these, our country would lose its heritage. This is a cooperative store in Maple, Wisconsin, a store that's been in existence and operation for 72 years. And it was organized like many other cooperatives were by first-generation Finns who wanted to increase their buying power. During the early 20s, people in northwestern Wisconsin and northeastern Minnesota found these co-op stores in almost every Finnish community. In some areas, they were called the Finn Co-op, and the Finnish people called them the osuuskauppa. Ja kyllä on hyvää leipää.
No, I think that on the whole, in the small communities, the cooperative played a very important part.
Jack Hano of Lake Nebagaman, Wisconsin, worked for over 40 years in the cooperative business, starting his career as a young accountant and eventually working into management of the marketing and print shop for the Central Cooperatives in Superior.
It was a great help to many of the people. In a lot of ways, it was a kind of a, well, you might say a kind of a cultural, social center for them. Of course, as these people were building these cooperatives, of course, they had, besides taking care of the immediate needs of life's necessities, meeting in cooperative, they It was a real strong feeling that they were helping the nation as a whole, that they were working towards a more just economic system where the cooperative would give balance to these ups and downs so as to eliminate, if possible, the depressions that they had just lived through. And so there was a great deal of hope on the part of many of the members that it would play a real important part in the economy of the land.
I suppose it was the economic circumstances that brought the people in this area together, because they had to cut expenses, and they were mostly Finnish out in the rural areas, so it got synonymous with Finn store.
Although the co-ops in our area were synonymous with the Finnish immigrants, the idea and principles behind cooperatives originated in England. These principles offered no one person control of the store, but rather each patron became a stockholding member, and in turn, each member, regardless of shares held, had the right to one vote in deciding the store's business practices. By controlling their own store, the members ensured lower prices, better quality items, and superior service for themselves.
And it was something that gave us a distinction of being apart from any other supermarket or grocery store. We had the co-op label, and this was made us different. The people knew when they came in to buy that, you know, the red label, green label, and the blue label, they knew what they were buying. But now with the name brands, it's all grade A or better, but old-time customers, they preferred the co-op label, especially the coffee, the flour, and there was a lot of items that, well, everything that is packaged was packaged under the co-op label.
But increased competition from other markets and other products made it increasingly difficult for the co-ops to keep up.
The very fact that they were so democratic was to their detriment, because they couldn't make changes fast enough. It took always an annual meeting or a year or two to make a change, and it just didn't work out that way. In a modern world, you have to make decisions right now.
Yeah, and I suppose that the boards and some of the managers were probably, you would say, too thrifty, too. It would wind up to the same answer, that they were not spending the money that it required for growth, advertising and otherwise.
With changing times and conditions, some stores like this one in Zim, Minnesota, are forced to close or sell out. And stores that do survive and keep operating find that business is no longer done in the cooperative way.
You know, this is gone. Your old, like I say, your old-timers and the newcomers now, with the lack of cooperative education, have, you know, we're just another grocery store. We are servicing the area, the community, and I'd hate to see it disappear, because, you know, down the road, they'd have to drive 20 miles to buy their product.
One institution that has maintained identification as the Finnish tradition is the Finn sauna. With few exceptions, very few Finnish homesteads were developed without a sauna, and many are still in use today. Marty Matson tells us all about it.
This log sauna is one of the different styles of saunas being built yet in this country, and I guess I've built a few types myself to kind of fulfill the requirements of being Finnish in this country or being associated with Finns. I suppose that this sauna is the one real true thing about Finnish culture that's come here from Finland and stayed here, and has spread to other people as well. One of the best things I think about the Americanization of the Finnish sauna is that so many non-Finns have them and have developed this kind of a sauna social culture. I don't really know why the sauna should continue as being something that's the only place for cleanliness in a family. The tubs and showers certainly are better, but I certainly couldn't live without one. I know a lot of other people too, non-Finns, who have to have a sauna. It's a possession, for one thing. It's also another place to bathe, something that makes them feel good.
Welcome to Salolampi,
Salonlampi is a Finnish language training camp co-sponsored by the Concordia College and the Salonlampi Foundation Board. It provides a unique and exciting learning experience for those who want to learn more about their Finnish heritage, their culture, and customs. Larry Salko, Salonlampi's dean, explains why Salonlampi is a valuable tool in preserving Finnish heritage.
It's important to preserve Finnish heritage in the case of people whose ancestors came to this country from Finland, to preserve ties between the two countries so that people have a sense not only of being Americans, which we do not intend to diminish in any way, but also a sense of what it means to be an American, that American people have a culture that is made up of a combination of many different cultures, and certainly in this part of the country, the Finnish culture is a part of it, especially in those families where there are some ancestors who have come from Finland. And also, we don't only intend that they realize that there is a Finnish culture, but that there are other cultures besides, that each of these cultures is important.
During the students' 2-week stay at Salonlampi, they learned Finnish in the same manner as they learned English.
Theoretically, everything is done in Finnish at Salonlampi. Of course, when you get a group of young people together who don't speak fluent Finnish, they need to communicate with each other, so you will hear an occasional English word here. Meal times, we encourage a lot of Finnish at the table. Children can't get something if they ask for it in English. They can ask how to say it and then ask for it in Finnish, but they can't just say, "May I have the milk?" because we're all deaf to English at the table.
Traditional Finnish meals are served each day to the Salonlampi campers and staff, including servings of piirakka, pannukakko, lanttuloota, fili, and vahtopuuro. Nearly all activities at the camp help to reinforce the instruction of the Finnish language. Everyday activities such as a visit to the post office can be a learning experience.
If they want to get any mail that's come for them, they have to ask for it in Finnish and identify themselves in Finnish. The person who is then giving the mail out won't give it to them until they ask in Finnish, but at the same time will help them if they're having a little trouble saying it in Finnish. We don't want to deprive them of their mail. We don't want to sound threatening. It's the same way at the bank and at the kioski, our store where they can buy things. They have to ask for it in Finnish, but the people selling it will help them ask.
Staff counselors work together to make learning a fun experience. In addition to those instructors from our area, guest counselors from Finland help to add additional insight to modern Finland. Esa Laukkanen has been a long-time member of the Salonlampi staff, teaching dance and the kantele, in addition to ensuring the proper instruction of the Finnish language.
American Finns who have immigrated in the beginning of century, they have wanted to preserve that culture and traditions which they had in those days in Finland. But nowadays in modern Finland, the culture has been influenced by other Western cultures. We are trying to bring with us one part of modern Finland here, one part of our traditions, what we know, what we can bring, and trying to create this language village like it would be somewhere in real Finland.
Another of the Finnish-born instructors is Hannu Haukkala. Tradition plays a special part in his teaching.
My generation, at 70s and 80s, have heard lots of American music, movies, and they have, or we have, get lots of influences from here. So when I was under 20 years old, I laughed Finnish traditions and I didn't care about them. But now I've grown up a little bit older and I have understood something about Finnish traditions. And when I came here and I sang our national hymn, anthem, and some other Finnish songs, for example, our Blue Cross flag, I almost cried because the feeling was so familiar, and I was surprised that I sing that song in America. I didn't care it in Finland.
Those who have observed the Salolumpi experience will agree that the Finnish language and the Finnish culture are being kept alive in the United States.
If a young person comes here and knows no Finnish at all, and by the way, they don't have to know any Finnish to come here because they learn it here. They learn everything they need here. And we try not to make anybody uncomfortable because they don't know the language. They are not going to go home in 2 weeks speaking fluent Finnish. If they come back year after year, naturally, they increase their knowledge of Finnish. And then in the 50 weeks that they have off every year, hopefully they'll be practicing it with their parents or grandparents who may speak Finnish, or they'll be doing some work on their own learning Finnish. But what we really want to do is create an interest in Finnish culture and language so that they will continue on their own.
Most of the original immigrants have passed on, but those of us who were born of immigrant parents have shared many of the Finnish traditions that were woven into our American lifestyle. In one sense, we lived in two worlds and witnessed a mixture of ethnic culture.
I think one of the obvious differences between the contemporary Finnish culture and the Finnish-American culture is that our culture stems from the Finnish immigrants, which was, I think, an entirely new spirit of its own. The people that came over were, looking for something, and they were willing to endure a lot. And I think that's really, maybe that's what's more important than the actual Finnish tradition, is that Finnish-American.
Uusi, Aika, modern times. Times that reflect on past memories of the experiences of our past generations. Experience that led to the preservation of a culture and in the improvement of self, family, and community. Let us remember these past experiences as the stepping stones leading to the conditions we enjoy today, and for the culture and heritage that we share through these stepping stones in this, our Uusi, Aika.